আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে, আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে।
A very good evening, friends, guests, and fellow members. On behalf of the Library Subcommittee, welcome to the 11th edition of the Calcutta Club virtual session. This is our second program commemorating the centenary of Satyajit Ray. This evening, we present a book reading session from the recent Penguin Books publication, The Three Rays. It is a compilation of pieces from Satyajit Ray's own repertoire and that of his father, Sukumar Ray, and illustrious grandfather, Upendra Kishore Ray Chaudhary. The original stories and poems in Bangla, like Tuntunir Boi and Gop Churi, that formed part of our childhood excitement, had been created into English by none other than Satyajit Ray himself. It is a pleasure to be introducing our performers for this evening, Rita Roy and Pradeep Mitro, members of our club, who will be performing the translations so that we can all enjoy the incomparable compositions. Pradeep Mitro worked as the head of the bonds division in an investment banking company. So professionally, he is a banker, but he kept alive his passion for acting. He has acted with major groups in Kolkata and staged plays in Mumbai, Pune, Bengaluru, and also in the UK. He also acts in TV commercials and films, including international productions. Rita Roy has been brought up on singing, dancing, and school dramatics. She has been a school teacher. She has given several public performances in singing and took to the stage with Calcutta Club's English drama production. This program is brought to you in association with Spotlight, one of the premier English language theatre companies of Kolkata that has been staging plays and dramatized readings for several years now. Today's session will last approximately 45 minutes, so do sit back and enjoy. Thank you.
"100 Korpar Road. That was where it all began. Built by Upendra Kishore Ray Chaudhary, the building was not only his home, but also the printing press of U. Ray and Sons, the birthplace of the popular magazine Sandesh. Upendra Kishore had captured the spirit of juvenile literature, which remains matchless to this day. His charming turn of language, versatility as a writer and painter proved to be a delightful and magnetic combination to enthrall the readers of Sandesh, young and old. We open this evening's program with two pieces from Upendra Kishore Ray Chaudhary's writings.
Narahari Das. On the edge of a big forest which lay at the foot of a mountain, there was a meadow. In that meadow, there was a hole in which lived a baby goat. He was so small that he wasn't allowed to go out at all. If he wanted to, his mother would say, "No, you mustn't go out. If you do, a bear might catch you, or a tiger snatch you, or a lion eat you up." So this scared the baby goat and he stayed in without a murmur. When the baby goat grew up a little, he became a bit bolder, so that when his mother was out, he would put his head out of the hole and peer around. At last, one day, he was bold enough to come out of the hole. Nearby stood a big ox eating grass. The goat had never seen such a huge animal before. But when he saw the ox's horns, he thought, "Oh, he must be a goat grown big and strong because he eats good food." So he went up to the ox and said, "Please, sir, tell me what you eat." So the ox said, "I eat grass." The goat said, "My mother eats grass too. Why isn't she as big as you?" So the ox said, "I eat more and better grass than your mother does." "Where do you get such grass?" "Over there in the forest," said Ox. "I wish you would take me there," said the goat. So the ox took the young goat to the forest. The grass in the forest was indeed delicious, and the goat ate so much of it as he could. At the end of the meal, his stomach was so full that he could barely move. As dusk fell, the ox said, "Oh, let's go home now." But the goat couldn't walk. How was he to go back? So he said, "You carry on. I'll go back tomorrow." The ox went away. The goat found a hole and crawled into it. Now, that hole happened to be the home of a jackal. The jackal was out dining at Uncle Tiger's. He came back late in the evening and found that his hole had been taken over by a strange creature. Since the goat was black and it was dark inside the hole, the jackal couldn't see very clearly. He thought the creature must be some kind of a monster. So his voice shook a little when he asked, "Who's in there?" The young goat was very clever. He said, "My long beard is my all feared. I'm the lion's bigger brother, Narahori Dash. I dine on 50 tigers, while others eat grass." When the jackal heard this, he gave a yell and bolted, stopped running only when he reached the tiger's house. The tiger was very surprised to see the jackal. "Why, nephew, you left only a little while ago. What brings you back so soon? And why do you look so flustered?" The jackal replied, panting, "Oh, uncle, we are done for. There's an Orohori Das in the hole where I live. He says he eats 50 tigers for dinner." The tiger got very angry at this. "Oh, what cheek! What cheek!" he said. "Come along. We shall see how he eats 50 tigers." The jackal said, "Well, I'm not going back. If he was charging at us, he'll run away for sure, but I cannot run as fast as you, so I'll be the one who'll be gobbled up." The tiger said, "Don't be silly. How can you ever think I'll leave you behind?" "Then tie me to your tail," said the jackal. So the tiger tied the jackal's tail to his own, and the jackal thought, "Now Uncle Tiger can't run away without me." And the two of them set out for the jackal's hole. The young goat spotted them from a distance and shouted, "Oh, you good for nothing! See what you've done! I paid for 10 tigers and you've only brought one." At this, the tiger's heart stopped beating. He thought the jackal must have led him there to be eaten up by Narahari Das. So he swung around and was off with a leap that took him 10 yards. Then he broke into a run with the jackal still tied to his tail. Oh, the poor jackal was up in there one moment and dashed to the ground the next. He got scratched all over from thorny bushes, and his head kept bumping against trees. The more he yelled, the more the tiger felt sure that Narahari Das was about to catch up with them, which made him run all the more. Thus they ran all through the night. Next morning, the young goat found his way back home. Oh, the jackal, of course, had learned his lesson. He was so angry with the tiger that he never spoke to him again.
The Toonie bird. The Toonie bird's nest was in a corner of the king's garden. One day, some coins from the king's treasury had been put out in the garden for airing. When they were taken back in the evening, one of them got left behind by mistake. Toonie found the shiny coin, took it up in her beak, and put it in her nest. How rich I've become, she thought. I've got the same thing in my nest as the king has got in his treasure chest. The thought ran in her mind and she sang, what the king has in his chest, Toonie has in her nest. When the king heard the song, he said, what does the bird mean by that? The men of the court folded their palms and said, Your Majesty, the Toonie bird says she's got something in her nest which makes her as rich as Your Majesty. This amused the king very much. He said, go and fetch out what she's got. So they found out and came back to say, Your Majesty, there's a silver coin in the Toonie bird's nest. But that must be my silver, said the king. Go and fetch it. The king's men went and brought the silver back. Sadly, the Toonie bird sang, the king must be very needy if my silver makes him greedy. This made the king chuckle again. That's a cheeky bird, the Toonie said. Go and give her back the silver. Toonie was happy to get her silver back. This time she sang, the king is scared of me, I see, to send my silver back to me. The king asked his men, what is that bird saying now? She says, Your Majesty got scared, they said, and that is why the silver was sent back to her. At this, the king flew into a rage and said, is that so? And he said, well, catch the bird and bring her to me. Poor Toonie was caught in no time and fetched. The king clutched the bird in his hand and went straight into the palace to his 7 queens. Have the bird roasted nicely for my dinner, he told them. When the king left, the 7 queens took a good look at the bird. One of them said, oh, what a dainty little thing. Please let me hold it. When she took it in her hand, another queen wanted to hold it too. While being passed from one queen to another, Toonie suddenly managed to wriggle out and fly away. Oh, what a misfortune, thought the queens. What were they to do now if the king found out? There would be real trouble. While they stood moping and worrying, the big toad went hopping by close to them. When the 7 queens saw it, they all swooped down upon it and caught it. Then they whispered, shh, no one must know about this. We'll have this toad roasted instead of the bird, and the king will never know the difference. So they skinned the toad and roasted it, and when the king ate it, he found it delicious. Next day, just as the king was about to sit on the throne thinking, I've taught that bumptious bird a good lesson, Toonie sang out, who's the winner? I'm the winner. The king's had a toad for dinner. When the king heard this, he fairly leapt out of the throne. And he spat, and he choked, and he washed his mouth and gargled, and at the end of it all, he punished his queens. Have their noses chopped off, he ordered. The order was obeyed, and the 7 queens all lost their noses. Toonie came to know about this and sang. When clever Toonie so disposes, 7 queens lose 7 noses. The king heard this and said, fetch that bird again. I'll swallow her alive. Let's see how she gets out of it this time. So poor Toonie was caught and fetched. Bring me some water, ordered the king. Water came, the king filled his mouth with it, tossed the bird in and gulp. Everyone said, that's the end of the wily bird. But in a little while, the men of the court were startled by the sound of a mighty belch, which came out of the king's throat, and with the belch came out Toonie Bird, flapping her wings. Oh, there she goes! Grab her! Shouted the king, and the poor bird was caught again. Once again, the king filled his mouth with water, while a sentry stood by with a bared sword to bring it down on the bird if she should fly out again. This time the king kept his hand pressed over his mouth, and after swallowing the bird, poor Toonie wriggled and fluttered about in the king's stomach. The king bore it for a while. Then, all of a sudden, he screwed up his face, made a noise like "walk," and was sick. And once again, Toonie came out flapping her wings. The men of the court set up a great hue and cried, kill the bird, sentry, kill the bird, they shouted. Don't let her get away. The sentry, muddled by all the shouting, swung his sword wildly about, and instead of hacking the bird in two, hacked off the king's nose. The king set out a wild yell, and with him yelled all the courtiers. Then the doctor came and bandaged the king's nose and managed to bring him round. Toonie saw all this and sang, the king is in a sorry plight, he's lost his nose, it serves him right. With this song, little Toonie flew far and high away to another land.
Sukumar Rai. Although Sukumar Rai, the second generation genius, died at the age of 36, he left behind a legacy of drawings and writings no less exciting or enthralling as his father's, even to this day. The name Sukumar Rai conjures up his 2 most famous publications, Abol Tabol and Hojoborolo, equaled by no other publication during or after his lifetime. Sukumar formed the famous Nonsense Club, which published journals with miscellaneous writings and parodies of advertisements. His letters and diaries revealed his versatility, quirky imagination, and vibrant personality. Thanks to these, he became a household name for avid readers of all age groups as the king of nonsense literature. Now, Rita and I will be doing 2 poems of his, starting with
Rumi
Short
Tidings.
Patro.
Yes,
Rumi Tidings.
Short Patro.
Short Patro.
শুনতে পেলাম পোস্তাগে তোমার নাকি মেয়ের বিয়ে গঙ্গারামকে পাত্র পেলে? জানতে চাও সে কেমন ছেলে? মন্দ নয়, সে পাত্র ভালো, রং যদিও বেজায় কালো।
His face reminds me of, now let me see. Ah, yes, an owl, the same rotundity. Education, sir? Oh, now there's a lad with the strength of will that's to be had. He sat for final tests at school. No luck. He flopped. 19 times he tried, and then he stopped. Financial state, you ask? His property? Oh, he's sunk in debts as far as I can see.
মানুষ তো নয় ভাইগুলো তার, একটা পাগল, একটা গোয়ার, আরেকটি সে তৈরি ছেলে, জাল করে নোট গেছে জেলে। কনিষ্ঠটি তবলা বাজায়, যাত্রা দলে 5 টাকা পায়।
Gangaram himself despairs to fight his ailments of the spleen and hepatitis. But mark you, sir, his noble ancestry, oh, Ganga branches from a princely tree. Sham Lahiri, and it has been proved, is Gangaram's own cousin, thrice removed. Looking for a future son-in-law? I dare say you could hardly ask for more.
Pray for me. Don't be scared, my little man. Think I'm going to bite you? Ha! Silly notion. Don't you know I have no strength to fight you? My heart is full of kindness with no anger underneath. And all the biting that I do is seldom with my teeth. I know the horns upon my head must seem a trifle shocking, but butting pains my head, and so they're seldom used for knocking. Come into my little lair, my little man, and live with me a while. I'll treat you as a dear friend and put you up in style. The club I'm holding in my hand. Now, does that cause you panic? Oh, it's light as a feather. Take my word, it only looks Titanic. Well, well, I see you're not convinced by all that I have said. It's time I grabbed you by your legs and knocked you on the head. My wife and dozen kids and I believe it's downright silly to let escape a stupid man who's scared willy-nilly. The missing whiskers, or Kompchui. They always knew the boss Babu to be a gentle fellow. What happens if he, in a jiffy, turns all blue and yellow? He was seated in his chair, relaxed and free from care, indulging in his post-meridian nap, when, without a warning, in the middle of his yawning, something right inside him seemed to slap. With muffled cries, he rolled his eyes and threw his arms about. Alas, I'm sick! Come, save me quick, was what he sputtered out. They heard him, and they all began to cluster round him, the stricken man, and pondered on the safest plan to bring him to his senses. Call the police! No, no, the vet! His partner said he seems upset, but be careful, he might bite yet, said his amanuensis. But Boss Babu his face all red and swollen, now declared, "My moustache has been stolen."
গোঁফ হারানো আজব কথা, তাও কি হয় সত্যি? গোঁফ জোড়া তো তেমনি আছে, কমেনি এক রত্তি। সবাই তাকে বুঝিয়ে বলে, সামনে ধরে আয়না, মোটেও গোঁফ হয়নি চুরি, কখনো তা হয় না। রেগে আগুন তেলে বেগুন তেড়ে বলেন তিনি, কারো কথার ধার ধারি নেই, সব বেটাকেই চিনি। নোংরা ছাটা, খ্যাংরা ঝাঁটা, বিচ্ছিরি আর ময়লা, এমন গোঁফ তো রাখতো জানি ওই শ্যামবাবুদের গয়লা। এই গোঁফ যদি আমার বলিস, করবো তোদের জবাই। এই না বলে জরিমানা করলেন তিনি সবাই। ভীষণ রেগে বিষম খেয়ে দিলেন লিখে খাতায়, কাউকে বেশি লাই দিতে নেই, সবাই চড়ে মাথায়। আফিসের এই বাঁদরগুলো মাথায় খালি গোবর, গোঁফ জোড়া যে কোথাও কোথায় গেল কেউ রাখে না খবর। ইচ্ছে করে এই বেটাদের গোঁফ ধরে খুব নাচি, মুখগুলোর মুন্ডু ধরে কোদাল দিয়ে চাচি। গোঁফকে বলে তোমার আমার, গোঁফ কি কারোর কেনা? গোঁফের আমি, গোঁফের তুমি, গোঁফ দিয়ে যায় চেনা।
The third generation Rai proved to be another genius, gifted with the same qualities as his father Shukumar and grandfather Upendra Kishore. But his passion lay in films, which made Satyajit Ray a worldwide phenomenon. He was responsible for the revival of the children's magazine Sandesh in 1961. His spectacular cover designs and illustrations inside the magazine are now collectibles and priceless. Satyajit, of course, is best known for his uniquely directed iconic Pothir Pachali, the trilogy, to name just 2 out of the long list of memorable films. These earned him fame, an Oscar for Lifetime Achievement, and a Bharat Ratna Award. He certainly deserves to be the pride of Bengal.
Abstraction. Now, this, mind you, was written by Satyajit Ray in English, and it was first published in Amrito Bajar Potrika in 1941. Abstraction. He was 24, tall and lean. He had lean limbs, a lean face, and a leaner purse. He was an artist. The story starts at a moment when a casual observer could see him sitting on a 3-legged chair in an attitude of utmost inertia. A half-consumed cigarette hung precariously from his lips, and his hands held a book which seemed to absorb all his attention. But a closer inspection would reveal that the book in his hand was held upside down. He was merely gazing at what is called the middle distance. He was, in fact, thinking of the exhibition. It was an insertion in the morning papers which told him about it. The Fine Arts exhibition was to open its doors to the public on the 15th of January. A wide range of subjects and an unlimited choice of medium gave the artists considerable scope for displaying their talents. He had waited long and patiently for an opportunity like this. It was the one and only chance of gaining a certain amount of public recognition as a fairly adept wielder of the brush. He knew he could barely hope for an official commendation of his work, but he must see his picture hung all the same and let the people, the public, see it. And of course, there was always the possibility that the critics would just happen to mention your name in the review columns. So, with the inverted book in his hand, he gave himself up to meditation. He had to think out a subject for his painting. If he had any leaning in his personal views on art, it was towards surrealism. Those horrible distortions of nature, which seemed to be the essence of modern art, enraged his aesthetic sense. He dreaded that thing called surrealism. And abstractions, all those fantastic combinations of lines and forms drawn with a mad incoherence, left him utterly cold and unmoved. His friends who dabbled in art in the capacity of amateur critics or painters reproached him for his narrow outlook. More than once in the past, he had made attempts to read books on modern art, but each time he found the pictures in them so ridiculous. So the following day, he set to work on his picture. Oh, it was going to be a watercolor, that particular medium being his forte. He would draw Lady Macbeth walking in her sleep and call it the somnambulist. He whistled softly as he tried various color combinations on a sheet of paper. After he had hit on a satisfactory scheme, the actual work on the contemplated masterpiece began. For the 10 days that his picture took, he was rarely seen outside the gloomy, depressing little room which served as a studio. The patience and energy which he put into his work was most unusual in a man so sluggish and slovenly in his ways. The last touches were put on the 5th of January. And he went backwards and gazed at the easel from a distance, appraising the finished work. The longer he looked, the more it grew in his estimation. Color, the expression, the composition, they all seemed to bear testimony to his inspiration. But he could not afford to waste time in idle appreciation. It was the last day for sending in the entries, and so he went to the easel, unmounted the picture, and went in search of a piece of string and brown paper before going to the post office. The following morning, while breakfasting, he had a casual glance at the newspaper. Well, there was a small announcement by the Society of Fine Arts to the effect that they were gratified to see the unusually large number of entries they received. It was late in the evening when he went up to his studio. Groping in the darkness for a moment, he switched on the light. The room presented a sad spectacle with tubes of paints thrown here and there, brushes flung far and wide in moments of haste, and little bits of rag and paper strewn all over the place. So he's surveying the confusion of objects when a sheet of paper caught his eye. It was lying on the ground just below the easel. Stooping down, he picked it up. For a moment, the world seemed to grow dark around him, and he clutched at the easel to support himself. For in his hand, he held his beloved masterpiece, the Somnambulist, his very own creation. When the first numbing shock of surprise passed away, it did not take him long to realize what had happened. Once more, he was the victim of absent-mindedness. He felt sick and feverish. Oh, how the committee must have laughed when they received a parcel which contained a stiff cardboard and a small piece of paper with his name and the title of a picture without the picture itself. The cruel humor of it made him grind his teeth, and he solemnly cursed himself and his fate. And as for the picture, he tore it to pieces and threw the bits into the waste paper basket. During the week that followed, he made every effort to forget about the disaster. On the morning of the 15th of January, the opening day of the exhibition, he received a letter. It was a communication from the Society of Fine Arts. Oh, it was most likely he felt that the society was making an inquiry about the mysterious parcel. Very carefully, with fingers as steady as he could manage to make them, he took the note out. Dear sir, he read, we feel pleasure in congratulating you. It was incredible. He could hardly believe his own eyes. Briefly, in a semi-formal manner, the society informed him that his production, The Somnambulist, was the proud winner of the first prize. The note concluded with an invitation to the opening ceremony of the exhibition. His brain was in a whirl now at the utter improbability of the whole thing. He reached the town hall half an hour later, breathless and gasping with surprised excitement. The exhibition was on the first floor. He raced up the magnificent carpeted staircase, taking 3 steps at a time. Hall presented a truly colorful spectacle. All the 4 walls of it were teeming with pictures. With a heart beating wildly with excitement, he started scanning the pictures. Each of the prize-winning works had a neat label attached to its bottom, announcing the name of the artist and the title of the picture. He decided to concentrate on those little bits of paper. After an hour's scrutiny, he had exhausted the north, east, and south walls. But it was with an ebbing enthusiasm that he faced the west wall. His heart sank lower when he saw what confronted him. There were those dreadful, nightmarish paintings, those abstractions. Reluctantly, somewhat mechanically, he glanced at the label below the first picture, which was the first prize winner. Why? It was his own name. And the title, The Somnambulist. But what was this bizarre-looking thing, this weird mess of multicolored brush strokes? When a sudden flash of recognition told him it was the paper that he had tried his color schemes on.
The last piece of this evening is called Fritz, which has been translated, rewritten in English by Shotajit Rai. I had been observing Jayanto for some time and at last said, "You seem to be a bit mopish today. What's the matter? I hope you're not unwell." Jayanto pulled himself together and said, smiling, "Oh, no, no, on the contrary, I already feel refreshed. Oh, I love this place. You've been here before. Didn't you know it was a nice place?" I'd almost forgotten. Jayanto took a deep breath. "It's all coming back to me now, slowly." "When were you here last?" I asked. 31 years ago. I was only 6 then. We were sitting on the lawn of the circuit house at Bundi in Rajasthan. Jointo is a very old friend of mine. We were at school and college together. We had been planning this trip to Rajasthan for a long, long time, but it was proving rather difficult and for both of us to get leave at the same time. Jointo finally managed to wangle a week's leave during my autumn vacation. At first, it had struck me as a bit odd that Jointo should insist on Bundi. It was on our way in the train that I found out the reason. Jointo had wanted to compare his boyhood memories with his impression of today. Jointo's father had been in the archaeological survey. His job often took him to places of historical interest, and Jointo had accompanied him on one of his trips to Bundi. I have been noticing that Jointo is less communicative here than he usually is. Perhaps he's wrapped up in his memories. It's not unusual for someone returning to a place he knew as a child to feel wistful. As it is, well, Jointo is a bit more of an introvert than the average person. We were taking a stroll in the garden after tea when Jointo suddenly stopped and said, "Deodar." I turned to him in surprise. "A deodar tree," he repeated, "should be somewhere down here." Jointo suddenly started walking towards the corner of the compound. What was so special about a deodar tree that he should remember it? "It's here, just where I thought it would be." I caught up with him and said, "Well, a tree is apt to stick in one place, you know." No, it's not that. I'm only pleased to find it where I expected to find it. But why would you suddenly think of this tree? I can't remember why. I had come to this tree for some reason and done something. A foreigner. Foreigner? Sorry. I can't remember anything else. Memory is an odd thing. After dinner, more memories began to come back to Jointo. Then, in the end, he remembered Fritz. An uncle of his had brought back from Switzerland a foot-long puppet, an old man in native Swiss costume. It looked exactly like a miniature man, and it had movable limbs. Jointo was given the puppet a few months before his first visit to Bundi. Jointo said, "I had lots of toys as a child, but when my uncle gave me Fritz, I quite forgot my other toys. I used to play with Fritz all day. In fact, there came a time when I would keep talking to him for hours on end. The conversation was one-sided, of course, but the smile on Fritz's face and the look in his eyes was such that it seemed he could perfectly follow what I said." Jointo paused. I said, "What happened to the puppet?" Jointo was still lost in thought. I had brought the puppet to Bundi, and it was spoiled here." "Spoiled? How?" "Well, we were having tea in the garden one afternoon, and I had put the puppet down on the grass by my chair. Some street dogs had come into the compound and were romping about nearby. I was not supposed to have tea at that age, but I had urged my parents to give me some. The upshot was that I spilled some on my trousers and had to run to my room to change. When I came back, I found Fritz no longer there. Oh, I looked about frantically and found two of the street dogs playing tug of war with it. It was horribly disfigured, and its clothes were in tatters. In other words, Fritz didn't exist for me anymore. He was dead. And then I was fascinated by the story of Jointo's puppet. I gave him a decent burial. What do you mean? I buried him below that deodar tree. At last, the mystery of the deodar tree was cleared up. It was about 10 when we turned in. I don't know what time it was, but I was awakened in the middle of the night by a sound. I turned to Jointo and found him sitting bolt upright on his bed with a table lamp on by his side. I said, "What's the matter?" Instead of answering, Jointo put a question to me. Are there cats or mice in the circuit house? I shouldn't be surprised if there were, I answered. Why do you ask? Something walked across my chest. That is why, that is what woke me up. I said, "Couldn't you see anything after you put on the light?" No, to be honest, I was a bit scared, but I saw nothing after I put on the light. So I got out of bed and made a quick search under the beds and the furniture and behind the suitcases. I found nothing. The bathroom door was shut. Still, I went in to have a look when I heard Jointo calling out in a stifled voice, "Shankar!" I came back. Jointo was staring down at the yellow blanket. He held a portion of the blanket under the lamp and said, "Look!" There were some roundish brown marks on the blanket. "Those could be from a cat's paws," I said. Well, I assured him that there was nothing to fear with me in the room, and those marks must have been there already. Then I put out the light and went back to bed. If anything more happened during the night, I wasn't aware of it. As we had planned, we went to see the Bundi Fort after breakfast. Even here, a flood of childhood memories came back to Jointo. In fact, his excitement on seeing the fort almost made it seem that he had forgotten about the puppet. "There's the elephant over the gate. There's the silver bed, and oh, there's the throne." However, in a few hours, his enthusiasm waned. I was so absorbed myself that I wasn't aware of it at first. But I suddenly noticed that Jointo was not by my side. I found Jointo on the far side of the terrace, standing quietly by the parapet. "You must tell me what is the matter with you. I can't bear the sight of you so glum-faced in such glorious surroundings." "If you have finished looking, can we go now?" The two of us sat quietly in the back of the car. The way he cracked his fingernails and bit his nails showed that he was overwrought. I bore it for 10 minutes or so and then said, "You know, Jointo, you might feel better if you told me what was eating you. There's no point in telling you because you won't believe me." "Well, I could at least discuss it with you." Jointo turned to face me. Fritz was in my room last night," he said. "Those marks on the blanket were his footprints." I said, "But you actually didn't see him, did you?" "No, but I did feel that the thing that was walking over my chest had 2 legs, not 4. I hit upon a plan. If the puppet had been buried 31 years ago, And if the place of burial was known, digging there might reveal some remnants of it. It might help to drive away the absurd notion that was plaguing him now. When I described my plan to Jointu, he seemed to react favorably. He pondered for a few seconds and said, but who will dig? And where will you get a spade? I laughed. When there's a garden here, and they obviously have a gardener too. And the gardener must have a spade or a shovel. So after lunch, we went out on the veranda and sat down in the cane chairs. About 3 p.m., an old man with white hair and a moustache came to the garden with a watering can. I asked him if he would do a little digging for us. The gardener looked at me suspiciously and said, "Why, sir?" I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "Never mind that. We will give you 5 rupees for it. Just do as we tell you." I signaled Jointu to join me. I noticed that he was looking very pale indeed. I fervently hoped that the digging would reveal some remnants of the puppet. The 3 of us walked towards the deodar tree. Jointu pointed to a spot about a yard from the base of the tree and said, "Here, I hope your memory can be trusted," I said. Jointu gave a brief nod. "How far below the ground did you bury it?" About a foot." Gardener got busy with his shovel. Went on, digging. Why was there no sign of puppet yet? I had turned my head at a call from a peacock, when a strangled cry from Jointu made me turn sharply towards him. With his eyes bulging out of his sockets, he extended an arm and pointed with his fingers towards the ground. Then came the question in a hoarse voice, "What on earth is that?" The shovel dropped from the gardener's hand. I looked down at the pit and my jaw dropped in horror mingled with utter disbelief. In the pit, half embedded in the earth, lay with its arms and legs spread, a foot-long white human skeleton.
আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে, আহা কি আনন্দ আকাশে বাতাসে।
On behalf of Spotlight, Rita and I would like to thank the Library Subcommittee of the Calcutta Club for giving us this opportunity. It was a lovely evening, we thought, and we loved doing it. Good night.
Thank you very much for watching.
On behalf of the Library Subcommittee at the Calcutta Club, we would like to thank Spotlight and our 2 extremely engaging speakers, Rita Roy and Pradeep Mitra. Professor Jayati Gupta for a fantastic introduction, the President and the Executive Committee of Calcutta Club for their support, Debashish, Mr. Rao and Piali also from Calcutta Club for support, Mr. Romit Beed and Ad Infinitus for their creative input. The book, 3 Rays, will soon be available at the Calcutta Club Library. I would also like to let you know that our next event will be on the 25th of July, which will be a discussion on Jayati Gupta's book, Travel Culture, Travel Writing and Bengali Women, 1870 to 1940. The author will be in conversation with Dr. Sharbani Gupta. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Move to. No, on আছে যেমন no.
Romit, please close the session now. Thank you.